So I want to welcome everybody in the audience to our Pros Who Know 2024 Tech Deep Dive session. This is Tech It or Leave It, transforming shipping challenges into triumphs. And I'll just start off here by saying we all know the impact that investments in supply chain technology can have in reducing costs, improving efficiency, increasing visibility in our distribution environments or shipping operations through various systems, automation equipment, analytics. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk through some common challenges that we have faced in deploying technology and some best practices for dealing with them. I want to introduce our panelists today. We're going to have a good discussion from some industry experts. So we've got four panelists on this. I want each one of them to introduce themselves. I'll kick it off. I am Clint Boaz. I am the Senior Sales Engineer for ProShip Software, and I'm going to serve as moderator for this discussion. Just in terms of my background, I've been working in supply chain, shipping, multi-carrier technologies for over 20 years, working with a lot of customers on the pre-sales side and on the post-sales side. I've worked with a lot of large retailers. I've worked with a lot of recognizable international brands. I've also worked with small startup companies with a lot of different technology integrations. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly that's out there. And I want to introduce our other panelists here. I'm going to start off with Brett Hamrick. Brett is the Director of Business Intelligence and Analytics from Porter Supply Chain. Brett, if you just want to let us know a little bit about your background, what you do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Craig. Like Craig mentioned, I'm the Director of BI and Analytics at Kerber Supply Chain for our FAP division. Been with the organization for 8 years, but lead two teams over here at Kerber. One's focused on transportation analytics and cost optimization for some of the world's leading brands through our business intelligence platform. And then the second's going to be focused on transportation finance. Through integrated reporting suites, we're driving carrier funding, split cost allocation, accruals, and all month-end activity. So looking forward to the discussion today.
All right, thanks, Brett. And then next we have Alex Kincaid, Senior Manager of Marketing and New Business Development for Stream Tech Engineering. Alex, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks a lot. Yeah, I've been with Stream Tech Engineering for about 4 years now. We're an integrator of anywhere in the picking or in the fulfillment area of the warehouse, anywhere from picking all the way to shipping and sortation. So we work with ProShip often. Our customers, from time to time, are integrating our systems with yours, and so we see a lot of interesting things, and we talk to customers pretty much every day who are looking to solve complex shipping problems. So yeah, happy to be here.
All right, glad to have you. And then last but not least, Mike Rock, Director of Client Services for Open Sky Group. Mike, if you could please let us know a little bit about yourself, what Open Sky does.
Sure. Thanks, Clint. Hi, everyone. I've been involved in supply chain now for over 20 years. Initially, I was a DC manager and eventually made the change over to the Open Sky Group 13 years ago. At Open Sky, we work with many different customers across all industries of the supply chain. And really where I've focused over the years has been WMS implementations. And that has primarily been on I'll go way back, Red Prairie JDA BY platform. But our company is starting to expand into different platforms. And we're also developing some of our own internal analytic tools. Again, besides implementations, we focused on just continuous improvement, whether that be upgrades, integrations to new technologies, and then also, just report development. So really anything that we can do to help customers improve their operation. That's what we try to do. So back to you. Thanks, Clint.
All right. So we've got a great panel here representing shipping technology, business intelligence, automation, systems deployment and integration. Pretty broad set of skills, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experiences represented here. And for our agenda, we're going to talk through common supply chain tech traps. We're going to talk about leveraging integrations for success. We're going to conclude with data-driven decision-making, and then give some final advice, and as I said, spend some time in Q&A. So let's get started with common supply chain tech traps. I think we've all been there. We have all worked in various projects where we have implemented different aspects of technology. And these are various things that we have found in our experience to look out for. These are the gotchas. Things like ignoring the software component, overcomplicating automation, lack of stakeholder involvement, insufficient planning and testing. These are the things that really came to mind when we were talking about supply chain traps to avoid. And looking at the first one, ignoring the software component in a distribution center, in a warehouse, in an operation, you've got a lot of components. You've got conveyors, you've got material handling equipment, you've got peripheral devices like scanners and scales and printers, you've got hardware, you've got cloud infrastructure, all of that's at play in the modern warehouse. And this trap of ignoring the software component is one that we found commonly trips up projects. And I guess, Alex, I'll just let you kind of get started on that. What are your thoughts on this concept? Explain to us, how one can fall into this trap and some of the aspects of that and how to avoid it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, relating to looking at the software, when we go to design a good material handling system, whether that's very small or whether it takes up a large portion of the warehouse, taking packages, hundreds and hundreds of feet up mezzanines and down, different floors and things. Whether it's very simple or very complex, you'll have a failed project if you ignore the software component. I mean, we have clients that come to us and say, I had one just the other day who was very great people, very interested in getting an end of line, system to identify, weigh, dimension, manifest their packages, and label them and verify them. And after we discuss their needs, we can quickly dive into designing a system. But right at the end of the call, they said, I'm not even sure if our existing software stack can handle inline, in motion, weigh, and dimension on the fly like that. And I said, well, how about before we dive into design, you guys go ahead and check that out, look into that, and get back to us. And that there's ways to overcomplicate that, and I don't want to jump through this entire slide, but I mean, there's ways to overcomplicate that, and there's ways to completely ignore that, which would be a mistake as well. But
well, Alex, I think when we were talking about this as we were leading up to it, one of the things that we touched on too that is perfectly in line with what you're saying is the value alignment component of all of this. And it's the value alignment, not just internally within your organization, but externally with the partner that you're looking to choose. As you go down value alignment, you have to understand the outcomes or the actions or really the results that you're looking to achieve through a software or systems integration. And if you haven't fully uncovered all of that, I mean, we'll hit these other bullet points with the right stakeholder involvement, then those exact same questions or misses are going to come up throughout the process. So you need to get all the right outcomes listed out as to what you're looking to achieve internally. And then as you're going to select a vendor or even going into a space, not just a vendor specifically, but the software that you're looking to solve your challenge, you need to align that piece of software or solution is going to solve it as well. Because common pitfalls are, hey, we have problem X, Y, and Z, we go look to partner with a vendor. And then when we get into it, we try to pigeonhole that vendor into solving that problem for us when it's not necessarily what their technology stack is set out to do. And, a big component of that is ignoring all of the other things that are tied to just what you're looking to implement. And sometimes that software component is a really big player and catches people up a lot of times.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. When we
and
have,
I think there's.
oh, go ahead.
No,
Mike.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, when we have the IT, or I say IT, when we have the technology leaders at the organization involved in the project very early on, most of the time they start speaking a language that I'm not familiar with, but just having them involved allows them to have they can develop a plan, they can develop the goals, they can establish that this is a project within their company. It's one thing to have senior leadership or even a warehouse director, someone at that level say we need to do this, especially in our space with equipment. But it's totally another thing to say, yeah, well, the IT team said they don't have the bandwidth to even dive into this for another year. So you can design all the coolest tech you want, but our team can't even get involved for until a year from now. So.
And I think you're right. And I'm thinking what Brett was saying, and I know it kind of bleeds over into the last point of planning, but again, you can find there's great options out there for software and other types of tools that will help you with your performance. But if it's not going to match what your plan is, I don't want to say it's wasted, but it's kind of misspent capital. You just want to make sure you do have a solid plan and you know what are the issues we're trying to address, and just making sure that software is going to be able to do so. And I know that's kind of getting the last point, but I think it's, again, as we're saying, it all kind of ties together.
Yeah, it's hard not to jump around in this list because of the cascading effects of
Right.
of value alignment, and then what that does to the rest of it. I mean, the stakeholder piece is one that's really key for us. It's you can't have 30 people in the room, but you're probably in trouble if you only have 2 in the room at the same time. And having that proper stakeholder involvement leads to the right value alignment. I mean, they're so intertwined together. It leads to the right testing too, because that's another thing that we've called out consistently is what does sufficient planning and testing look like? How do we not overcomplicate the automation sequences or the automation of this through over testing? And how do we test properly throughout the organization? Like that pitfall of having what we would call top down, bottom up testing involvement and alignment is really important, because you can't have a proper implementation if only the users are the ones that are in there running that implementation. Because at the user level, sometimes they'll misalign from what the value is of the project. Same thing on the reverse side of things. From a project alignment standpoint, if we only have the leaders or the decision makers in the room, they're going to miss a lot of the details and minutia that runs the day-to-day operations for a project and implementation to be successful. So both sides of the coin have to be involved from the stakeholder standpoint, and then having the right testing detail to where we're not just kicking it over to one side of the house and letting them run with it, and that just checks the box. That involvement is going to be key throughout the organization.
Yeah, Brett, I mean,
I don't know how many times I have on paper sat down with a project team or various, business owners in an area, and they'll say, this is the process. And then you ask, can we walk through it out there on the warehouse floor? And you find out that's not the process. The guys that are actually down there doing it will say, oh, we haven't done it that way in 5 years, ever since Jeff told us to quit scanning that document or quit telling us to stack these pallets over here or whatnot. So going up and down the chain at all levels for stakeholder involvement, I think is key.
And one thing I would add, Clint, it just reminded me of an old example. You want to have those stakeholders, still interact with one another. Years ago, when I was still in the warehouse, we had IT come up with a solution, and this was with parcel packing, where we were not going to produce packing slips for certain customers. And from an IT perspective, that was a great solution. But the ops side had to raise their hand and say, no, that won't work at all, because we've trained a lot of our temporary employees that if you don't get a packing slip, it's not working properly. So that's where that interaction and that communication between these different stakeholders is very important as you're going through not only the planning and testing, but also implementation.
Yeah. I mean, there's really kind of two ditches you could fall in on the software side. One would be to completely ignore it and get all the way, especially with designing some sort of a technology system, completely ignore it and get all the way to implementation time and find out that the software does not support what you've built. The opposite would be, we say we can't put anything in our warehouse until the software is running, and at like a spinning top, and we'll see in a couple of years. I think there's probably a happy medium somewhere in there.
Yeah.
On this idea of overcomplicating.
I was going to say, Clint, before we move on from this topic, I mean, there's two others that are on here that really stand out to me that maybe we've hinted around but haven't talked about specifically. One is the "we'll figure it out later" component. Try to limit those pieces of discussion as much as possible. I know that sounds kind of facetious as we say it, but when we go through implementations with customers, that's a frequent phrase that I hear used on their side. And it's maybe not said directly like that, but you can tell that's the intention behind the conversation, to wrap up a call or to continue to push things forward or to meet a deadline that's arbitrarily sitting out there. It's going to be a little bit more painful, but have the "we'll figure it out later" conversation as soon as possible. And with that goes the other one that stands out to me. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this a lot, but it's change alignment. So we chart down a course, and sometimes changes and flexibility is necessary. And that's why having a really good partner from an implementation standpoint helps. But change alignment throughout the organization becomes just as pertinent, because sometimes that change alignment will happen with 3 people in the decision-making component of things, and that isn't disseminated throughout the users. It's not disseminated throughout other departments that are going to be affected by this. You'll have a lot of conversations that said, oh, at the outset of this, I thought we were trying to achieve something completely different than what you're telling me now. So having that change alignment is another key, or it's a trap, but if you're doing it well, it's how you become uber successful with those implementations that you're running, because they don't always go perfectly.
So I think we've kind of skipped around a lot of these bullets. The one thing that I want to circle back to is this idea of overcomplicating a solution or overcomplicating automation. It reminds me of something that I once heard somebody say about a good engineer is not measured by all the components they put in a solution, but by the components that they don't put in the solution. Alex, I know you had some thoughts on this a few days ago when we were talking about it. Do you maybe round out this slide by talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've run into is I think we were discussing this the other day, where it's like, overcomplicating the solution. It's like, are we going to rate shop by 40 different carriers and service levels for every single package that comes through this system, or are we going to do we need to do that? Do we need to do that? Because I think that's going to overcomplicate, the design, the response time. I think that's going to be overkill. And I think we just, when people get started, sometimes you do just start with a wish list, and you're just like, I'm going to do that, and just add everything you can possibly add to the list. And by the time you make a list like that, you're way overcomplicating it. You're not going to be driving toward you're really not going to be driving toward a solution. You know, we have some clients that when we're discussing these things, they say, cool, sounds like we've got a good project. And how about I start a weekly meeting and just 1 hour every week into perpetuity, and I'll just set that on the calendar. Is that okay? And we have to say, hold on, why don't you guys do that internally? Let us know when you're aligned on some of your goals. And I mean, we're happy to join some meetings, but there's an overcomplication to some of these. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, it does. Thanks. And then, lastly, I think when we talk through this, as has already been said, planning and testing is really the common element here. Taking the time to do it, planning, and answers a lot of these challenges. I think we talked about the importance of having a good project manager to keep the project between the ditches, and keeping the stakeholders on task, identifying the right stakeholders, identifying the right project goals. Any final thoughts on this topic?
I'll do one quickly here, Clint. Just the last one was on testing. And again, just from what I've seen many a time, everyone realizes projects are fluid and things will change. But a mistake we see often is people that really shortchange their testing. Whatever you're going to call it, your smoke testing, your volume testing, it really is a detriment to the project if testing time is cut. And again, I know that time is valuable, but you do want to have a team that can test out what I would say your standard, your main processes. Because kind of as a sidebar, people can sometimes go down the trap of trying to test every sort of exception. And while it's good to do certain ones, you still want to say, okay, let's make sure that the main processes are working as we expected and are delivering the results we want to get from this new technology.
Great. So we're going to move on to the next topic of discussion here, which is leveraging integrations for success. And here we're going to talk about integration versus connection, benefits and best practices and success stories. This idea of integration versus connection, the difference between those two concepts. I just looked up prior to our call here, I looked up what the definition of these words is. So connect means to bring together or into contact so that a real or notional link is established, whereas to integrate means to combine one thing with another so that it becomes a whole, or that they become a whole. So it's the difference between just simply making two things talk to each other versus making two things useful in combination with each other. And we had good conversation on this leading up to the session. Again, Alex, maybe you want to kick off the discussion here, some thoughts that you've got on this idea of connecting versus integrating.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind, we have, when we get the IT folks involved early, we have designed a set of pre-documented open interfaces that we allow our customers or prospects to see for connecting to the software side of things, the multi-carrier TMS software. That may be a shared directory, that may be a TCP IP connection, it may be some sort of an API or a stored procedure of some kind. And we document those things so that we can show them what the integration, what kinds of fields we need to receive and what kinds of fields we're going to pass to them, the data that we're going to give them in that particular field and the response that we're going to expect. And so as soon as that stuff is way over my head. I mean, I read the document and it looks like gibberish, but as soon as we give that to our IT team, our prospect, the IT team, they love it. And they're like, wow, thank you so much. This answers all my questions. I'll stop peppering you with, complicated questions that you don't know the answers to. I just read it and it's in the document. So that really helps for them to know what we're going to expect from them and what we're going to pass to them, as opposed to just saying, yeah, we'll figure it out later and we'll connect these things.
Yeah, Alex, I would agree. When you're starting from an integration standpoint as kind of the buyer in this scenario, one of the things that I would expect from my provider is documented best practices, documented examples, documented specs, because you are leaning on these providers for their experience. I mean, they are the experts in this space. That's why you're choosing and partnering with these different solutions or softwares. And a lot of questions that we'll get is, what do other companies do? What's best practice to be doing in these situations? Because you'll have your own set of requirements, but you also don't want to do anything in a vacuum. And it's important from a solution provider, from a benefits or best practice, is to be able to provide those, to be able to walk people through it, and not just, we'll kick it back to the other slide, not just walk it through from a connection standpoint, but walk it through from a value standpoint, because that's the integration piece that comes into play so much. If you're just walking it through from a connection standpoint, that's when Mike's scenario of testing all these different exceptions or getting lost in the rabbit hole of the minutia of the detail really comes into play. If you're aligning from a value standpoint and then you're testing based off of that, and you have a provider that's keeping you in those guardrails, this is where Clint hinted at the project manager piece. Having a good project manager saves you time and time again. But those different components, they're not just best practices, but they're things that you should be asking for when you're going down the path of these integrations, whether it's the first project that you're running or one you've ran for 30 times. It's not something to assume when you're partnering with a new provider that they're just going to roll out the red carpet and here's exactly what you need to do. Prompt them with those questions and the right provider will have the answers for you.
Yeah, I'll allude to something Alex said earlier about going back to the idea of ignoring the software component, and can we even connect through the existing software that we have, or whatnot. It's important. It's obviously important to do proof of concept testing or to look at technical specs, but I've seen a lot of times where technologies that have been difficult to integrate to, maybe because they're older interfaces, maybe you're dealing with an older mainframe type system, or maybe even if you're dealing with a modern ERP or WMS or something that doesn't have a lot of capabilities in terms of interfaces, it's hard to integrate to. Sometimes you're just ecstatic that you can connect one system to another. I actually got a response back. I was actually able to share data from this system to that system, that it drowns out all that noise, drowns out the real original reason why you're trying to get the two systems to talk to each other to begin with. And sometimes that will cause you to settle for suboptimal design choices that don't really bring about the ROI and the impact on KPIs that a true integration working the way that the optimal design would. So these are challenges. These are challenges with getting systems to talk to each other. Let's talk about benefits and best practices. I know we identified some factors here about the technical capabilities, experience, alignment with business goals. Brett, I'll let you kick this one off. What are some benefits and best practices that you've seen in integrating technology in the supply chain?
From a benefits standpoint, it's you guys probably think I'm a broken record when it comes to value, but that is the largest benefit. I mean, that's why you're implementing a piece of software or solution, is to automate processes, to save money, to save time, to really improve your organization. Again, if you're going down the path from a connection only standpoint, your alignment on your business outcomes just get lost in the weeds. I'm sitting on an example here, Clint, on pins and needles to not get ahead of us, but there's so many strong examples of where value alignment throughout an organization with the right project manager as you're implementing comes into place, because you'll have one department that's going to ask a question or ask for something to be done or have a solution that they're looking to implement. But without getting everyone else involved from a stakeholder standpoint, and not just the stakeholders that you're working with internally, but the other partners that are going to be affected by this solution, that's where it's extremely key. So that's from a benefit standpoint. From a best practices standpoint, you nailed it earlier, Clint, a great project manager. It has to be key, no matter how small these projects are either. That's another thing to consider as you're going into this, whether it's an undertaking of a completely new software implementation, whether it's just a component or an add-on of that implementation. Having a project manager from an alignment standpoint to keep people on target for what you're looking to get out of the system is huge. One of our best practices that we use is we'll lead every single meeting from a project management standpoint with the top 3 value drivers that we're looking to get out of the system. That way, there's no question. So we get to ask that question every single time. Do we need this? Like you said, Alex, does this really relate to the 3 things that we're trying to drive out of this? Or is this something that's a one-off use case? I mean, that's a small, tip or trick to be able to use, but it's one that's extremely successful because it sets the tone for these integrations to hit the right outcomes that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, that's a gem.
That's a good reminder.
Yep. What was it?
Mike, you have thoughts on these bullets, or want to share some benefits, best practices that you've seen at Open Sky?
That's what I was going to go to, was the best practice. I mean, again, the one we're saying, besides Brett's talking about the PM, is again, knowing what you're looking to achieve data-wise. I think that's always important to keep in mind, and not getting kind of caught up or settling, as you mentioned, Clint, on data that you really don't want or need for what you're trying to achieve. But as far as a best practice, I think it's good to ask whoever you're partnering with, what's your experience? Meaning, do you have experience with the host system we're planning on using? And not that, hopefully whoever's done this, if they've done it often enough, they'll have great familiarity, and they'll know some of, the standard actions or standard configuration that needs to be done. So not only would I say, hey, what have you integrated with, but also, have you done a similar business? Meaning, if you're an industry that deals with foods and, let's say, lot control and expiration dates, you might ask your provider, have you done integration for something like this? What have you done? So I think that's where you get into a best practice, is just asking whoever your partner is going to be, what is your experience and is it similar?
Thanks. And then anyone from the panel, you want to maybe talk about some success stories you've seen from implementing best practices in IT projects and supply chain?
I know Brett he's itching to give a nice success story. Before he does that, can I give an opposite of a success? I have a success story that I can share as well. But we had I don't think that it's particularly a massive embarrassment for anybody, but we had a customer who we did the connection versus integration. They told us they had a particular TMS provider. They wanted to do a particular interface. They wanted to do certain types of multi-carrier rate shopping, and they said, yeah, this is the speed that we need to go. We design something, we work through the integration, we connect to it, and they say, oh no, we can't get the response rate. We're clipping the API, the ability for it to even, we're maxing out the limit of what we're able to even run through this API. So, you know, they said we're going to have to find some other TMS provider, and you know, we worked with them. That was sort of an issue on their side, but it was one of those where we learned from that. We said, wow, that's kind of amazing, you know, that they would allow us to get that far before they realized that their system wasn't even able to do that. So I just thought that was an interesting, and it works out, you know, everybody's happy now, but it was an interesting project.
Okay, so to move ahead here, we're going to blend success stories into the next topic, because I know, like we've said, Brett is just really been champing at the bit to get into the data-driven. Data-driven decision making is really the wheelhouse of Brett in corporate supply chain. So we talk through data-driven decision making in supply chain, importance of data analytics, collecting and analyzing data, using data to drive improvements. That is really the area of specialty for Corber. It's Corber supply chain. So Brett, I want to obviously pass the ball here to our star running back on that topic.
Yeah, it's getting a little weird now. If I don't give the best response that anyone's ever heard, you guys are going to be a little disappointed on this. But data-driven decision-making is one of my favorite topics. I think it is the key topic as we look for transportation, supply chain decision-making as it's moving forward. And we said it last time, it's ironic that we end with this because this is where you need to start in all of your implementation discussions as you're going through something. Data-driven decision-making cannot just impact your transportation spend in our world. Like we think a lot of times, hey, I want to reduce my costs. That's an important thing that supply chains across the world are looking to do, but that's not the only thing that data-driven decision-making does. We can start to impact our customer experience. That's extremely important when you have a partner like ProShip from a manifesting side of things to get that real-time data. Real-time data is huge. That's the key that I'll talk about in a success story if we have time as to what real-time data unlocks for people and why that's so important. The other side of things is don't ignore from a finance or AP perspective. That comes into play when we're looking at transportation data as well, and the importance that collecting the right data, analyzing that data, and putting it into best practice. If you haven't checked it out before, Kerber and ProShip have an awesome connection that really helps unlock this and is a super strong value when it comes to being able to leverage data to make decisions in terms of from an accrual standpoint, in terms of how well is my carrier actually servicing what we're setting out to do when we manifest these shipments? What's the accuracy of what we're projecting in the future for what we thought we were going to spend versus what we are actually spending down the road? As we set the right KPIs, that now allows us to understand how the platform needs to be configured and what we need to implement successfully for us to achieve that. And Alex, I love what you said, kind of your anti-connection versus integration. Connections usually lead to a lack of adoption. That is one of the most common things that I see. When we're just looking to get connected, adoption is not nearly what it is when we're looking to get integrated. And integration starts with data-driven decision-making and knowing those KPIs and outcomes that you're looking to achieve. So I think that's a good place to at least kick off the conversation here.
Sure. And I'd ask you, go ahead and share that success story. It's absolutely appropriate to insert that here.
Yeah, happy to. We work with, again, some of the world's leading brands, extremely large retailers, healthcare, manufacturers. And in one case, a customer came to us. It was just in their transportation department to start with. And they said, hey, we just want to get all of our data in one place. That's the goal. Hey, we just want to get our transportation data. Let's get it all into a data lake. I think we're going to be able to do some really good things with it, but we're just not quite sure yet. So again, it started out, I just want transportation spend visibility. Well, by bringing in the right partners as we walked through this with the right stakeholders, and these stakeholders weren't just internal. We did bring in IT, we brought in transportation, we brought in AP into these discussions, we brought in Kerber, but we also brought in ProShip because we knew the synergies from a data component, what we were looking to get out of this, weren't just going to be data visibility, but it was also going to be month-end accrual automation and reporting and financial visibility. So by going down this path of getting the right stakeholders involved, aligning on the value outside of what just one stakeholder had in mind, that was extremely important here. If we just would have just went off and made that integration or that connection, we would have had a bunch of data in one spot and they could have played around with it and it would have been probably successful. But now, because we brought in all these stakeholders, we automate month-end accrual visibility. So that saves days off of the process, not just hours. We're talking multiple days someone was engaged in this, and now it's in an automated fashion. We give that real-time spend visibility to them as well. To now we're catching mistakes as they happen, not weeks down the road after something would be invoiced from a carrier. And we're talking $1.5 million just with one small mistake that was made in this manifest detail that we're able to catch as soon as it goes out the door. So we caught it though, because we aligned on what the outcomes were. We aligned on what we wanted to measure through this process, because we never would have caught the 1.5 million if we didn't say, here's the KPIs we want to track. So that story is just a microcosm of how data can drive operational savings and operational changes and decision making in an organization, and was a huge success.
Yeah, those are great points. I mean, the data, I mean, part of what I got from that was that the data has to be actionable data. It doesn't do anybody any good if it just sits on a shelf and collects dust, if it's not the right data and if it's not timely.
Exactly. Right data, timely data, and a timely platform to be able to operate in it as well. A flexible platform to be able to operate within it, and a platform that is democratized. It's got to be something that's not just sitting behind that Alex is the only person in the entire organization that can extract these insights. It's got to be something that multiple people throughout the organization can jump in and leverage. And that allows for that speed that you need in a transportation industry, because you make one bad service level selection, somebody flips on next day AM and it starts going out the door, and you're a large retailer, you're going to be sunk come the next morning when you come in and check that out. So being able to have that real-time data is extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think,
go ahead.
I'll just go ahead and transition to final advice, and then if you want to share final advice, let's go ahead and do that. It's in the interest of time. I'll leave some time for the Q&A. But any additional follow up on that topic or final advice that you might want to transition into?
Yeah. I was going to say, Alex, if you want to go first, go ahead. And then I've got one.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I was just going to say there's a couple of things. This is probably a good spot for, some of the things that we see, looking at best practices, are you able to both handle the labeling as well as send a second, response to close that, two endpoints in the system, and when you're manifesting outbound shipments to both request the label and confirm that you did the job correctly. Another one would obviously be kind of the opposite end of what I was suggesting earlier, whereas if you test very much ahead of time, bounce your responses off of your TMS, test that ahead of time, and confirm that you can do it at the rate that you need consistently. Kind of the opposite of that other example. We have a client that is working with ProShip and has been for many, many years, has been a StreamTech customer for probably 15 years or more. And now they have, 4 or 5 different fulfillment areas, all bouncing off the same ProShip account, same ProShip interface at high rates of speed. and the latency has been, I mean, it's been huge. The fact that there's been virtually no latency for them has been key to their growth and success. So.
And the other thing I'll add quickly here, Clint, I know we're running out of time, is just kind of tacking on to what Brett said, is just using that data, the results you're getting to drive improvements. And again, to me, the value of continuous improvement. One of the customers we have with Open Sky has switched over to ProShip, and we're using data that we're getting from ProShip to help improve process, in particular with hazmat parcel manifesting and the required compliance labeling. So that's something that we're using that data to drive a new enhancement to make it better, where again, anyone in the warehouse knows the old term, to where we can avoid using tribal knowledge and use actual data to improve warehouse process.
One last call for final advice, then we'll transition to Q&A.
Yeah, I'll round us out. I mean, I think it's three things. We'll beat that drum. It's value alignment. It's having the right stakeholders involved. If it's a value alignment drinking game, I hope you guys are having a good time at home. And the last one is going to be is the data driven decision making. I mean, it's the three slides that we kind of outlined, but that is the most important component. If you take away anything, it's figuring out what components of data that you need at the end of your implementation to know if that implementation was successful, and are you achieving the outcomes that you set out to. If it's going to be just a swag or lick your finger and stick it in the air type pulse check to know whether or not this was successful, you may run into some success, but it won't be as successful as you need it to be. And the other thing to think about too is, as you communicate value internally to your organization, is, hey, we selected ProShip, we selected Kerber, we selected Open Sky or StreamSets. Like, you want to be able to tell a great story as to why that selection has been successful. And to have the right data is the only way that you can back that up from a factual standpoint, and it'll make you look like a rock star in the organization. I mean, you want an implementation to be successful. That's very key. And so aligning from a data standpoint as to what's going to lead to that will help you hit a home run.
Perfect. So a lot of great advice here, a lot of great topics we've covered. We've had a few questions come in at the end, and I want to make sure everybody has the contact information for our various panelists and the organizations they represent, and that is on screen. But in the few moments remaining here, I want us to turn to some of the questions that came in. A few of the questions really relate specifically to ProShip, so I want to address those just very quickly. Questions about like ProShip's technology stack and return on investment and things like that. I don't want to turn this into a ProShip sales call. We can certainly have a discussion if you would like to follow up with us. But I do just want to give some quick feedback in terms of ProShip we are a modern multi-carrier solution for parcel and LTL shipping. We are Windows-based with a modern API stack, JSON-based APIs, browser-based UIs that are written in a Blazor harness. In terms of return on investment you might see from ProShip, it's difficult to generalize, since various of our users are more aggressive in their carrier mix and might be using different carriers and might want to bring new carriers on. They might already be doing rate shopping and they're looking for maybe a more stable solution, or maybe it's the first time they've entered into rate shopping. But generally speaking, conservatively, we like to say that you'd experience a freight spend somewhere probably in the neighborhood of 6 to 8%. Conservatively speaking, probably reduction in operations. So we've seen up to 75% reduction in workflow effort and 40% increase in productivity from IT, just because of various things that we can take off of IT's plate and put into the solution and automate. So I wanted to address that really quickly. Again, I don't want to turn this into a ProShip sales call, but those questions did come in. Another question that I think is good for the panel is, with new solutions constantly emerging in the market, how can you ensure as a buyer that you're selecting a vendor who has the ability to follow through with their promises?
I mean, I can just give you an example of some of the things that we try to do to give some assurance to our prospects that we know what we're doing. Are they willing to share contact information for references? Do they have references published on their either on their website? You know, one of the things we try to do is we have a ton of fun producing case studies, success stories from any of our customers who are happy with what we've done, are happy with the ROI and the outcome, because we just really enjoy making them look cool and featuring what they do, being a part of their success. So if your partner is sharing those things openly, I would say that's a good sign. The other thing, like I mentioned before, is we try to be open with the way that we connect with the software. So we share a guide, we share an open, API interface guide, and we're happy to we try to be transparent, let people talk to a developer. I mean, I know that's not common in the industry, but to actually expose a software developer to a prospect, but we do that as well. I don't know if that answers the question exactly, but and then I had someone just the other day ask, after we got done with a call, they said, my leadership team is wanting to know what the ROI is for this system. It was a end of line system, and I can just give them ideas. I can't make that for them, but I can help give them ideas. You're probably going to save on your rate shopping by carrier. You're probably going to spend less. You're probably going to have more accurate dims and weights. You're probably going to save on some labor time. And just let them, if you want to feed us the data, we can try to help you a little bit. But anyway, I don't know if that helps answer that question, but that's what we try to do.
And real quick, Clint, I think I would just parrot what Alex said, is just that, if you have experience, be willing to share those experiences with any potential new customer or partner, because, we hope that our partners would be willing to give us a good testimonial, and that we've built relationships over the years with them that would, be something that we can, that we can show a new customer, and it's something they'll value.
Great. So I don't want to keep anybody over the allotted time for this session. I do want to just conclude. I want to thank all of our attendees for joining. Again, if you've got further questions or questions that we couldn't get to, please follow up with us. The contact information for all the partners is there on screen. And I also especially want to thank our partners on the panel, Brett, Mike, Alex, for joining today. You've given a good contribution to the discussion, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. So with that, we will let everybody go. Within about a week, you should receive ability to download this session if you want the recorded session. And again, at the end here, we would encourage you to please give us feedback on the survey. But other than that, we thank you wherever you are. Good morning, good evening, and have a nice rest of your week. We thank you for joining. Bye.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks, everyone.